one of the organizers of this event. I'm a senior iOS developer, been developing in iOS around 6 years. There are some of my contacts. If after the talk you have some questions and I run away and you don't get to ask, you can ask them there. Yeah, apart from iOS, I guess my hobbies, maybe someone can guess which sport I play?
Is it basketball?
Correct. Surprising, right? All right, so my talk. So my talk will be about one specific SDK we developed recently and the challenges involving it. Just to set the stage, basically it is a crypto selling SDK, which is meant to handle everything from A to Z. Like I'll explain more what it means later. But yeah, and another requirement is that it takes as little as possible steps for partners or third-party users to integrate it. That should be fine. So yeah, basic table of content. First I'll introduce with the functionality, then the approach we took, the development, some tips and tricks, the interface, dependencies, localization. This already tells you something about what it includes, bundled UI elements usage, which we kind of created to help our development. Some words about design system, how we tested it, how we documented it, and finally how we distributed it. All right, so functionality. Already, first thing I can tell, this is not your everyday SDK, because as you can see, there's 8 points of functionality. First of all, it involves also user interface, which usually is not a part of SDK. We have a predefined style support inside it for multiple partners who will be using it. Multi-team support, meaning light team, dark team, based on system, based on user selection. Multi-language support. Regarding this point, it's basically this is even if the app integrating it doesn't have the languages, we still support them. The SDK has authorization. It even has know your customers functionality, support live chat, and Apple Pay possibilities. All right, so the approach we took. So basically, we use the singleton approach. What that means is there's like upon initialization, you create a single shared instance, and if you want to talk to the SDK, you do it through the instance. Also, we have some callbacks. That means, so basically on some specific events, we need to give some feedback to the partner. We basically use like on success, on error, etc. And also, yeah, as I mentioned, one of the requirements is that it takes as minimal steps of integration, basically plug and play. All right, so the development. So we use the Cocoa Pods, not Swift Package Manager, because we are old school, I guess some would call us. But yeah, this also is in development for quite some time. And when we started it, the Swift Package Manager was in no state to be like this. It's easy when you create the example app to, the third point, basically to try to put yourself in the third-party user shoes. What I mean by that is whenever you create this example app, it's easy to say, oh, this SDK, I can't access that variable. I'll just make it public and forget about it. But no, try to think of actually put in. It's easy for you to understand that you only need this and everything will work. But remember that, I'll talk about interface a bit later, but remember as limited entry points to your SDK, as easy it is to integrate it and debug it, and less issues will arise and so on. Basically, metaphor I use is no one wants to live in a house with, like, let's say 10 doors. Usually we are used to 1 or 2 doors, and you should try to make the same approach for your SDK. So the interface. First thought of mine, make everything public, right? Let the users do whatever they want. Well, wrong. If you do that, you'll run into multiple issues, like you'll get angry partners saying, hey, I changed this variable in XYZ and everything broke, why is that happening? So my suggestion is start with basically everything private, and like every time you want to make something open or public, really think about it. Can you make some other ways to finish your functionality without doing that? And also, whenever you make something public, think of, should it be public only to get it, or should the partner also be able to set it? Because there are some cases when a partner only needs to access the value, but not to set it from outside, because that might break your functionality. It's not working there, yeah. Turn around. All right, dependencies. Probably the most painful topic regarding SDKs, as it gave us the most headache. As you saw, we must support a lot of functionality, and first thing, as also Mangirda said in the presentation, it's easiest just to find a package which does it for you. But unfortunately, in this case, we had to make some even compromises. Like, yeah, the first thought is try to avoid them. First of all, it makes it hard, if not impossible, to ship it as a black box product. Like initially, we wanted to ship it as a black box product, so basically no partner can see what we're doing inside. But because of some of the requirements of functionality, we needed some dependencies, and that made it hard. And also issues of integration, like for example, let's say you want to have analytics in your SDK. You implemented, already mentioned, like Crashlytics or Firebase or something, and then the app which integrates it also has Crashlytics, Firebase, and if, first of all, they are also made of sort of like a singleton, so there's already conflicts there. Plus, if like you use different version than the app's version, then the project won't compile at all. Yeah, that basically. Yes. So how did we resolve it? Well, first the way is frequent updates. What I mean by that is always follow all the dependency newest versions and try to update it and ship it to the client. But even then, if you, let's say, have 3 partners, you basically have to strong arm them to say, okay, if you want it to work, you must update all your dependencies to the latest versions. Other approach is hard set versions, but again, basically what I mean is you only can work with this SDK if your Crashlytics is, let's say, version 5. But then again, we're strong arming, and maybe there's some cutting edge functionality coming out, and you are basically making the app skip this version just because they're using your SDK. Some compromises. There was an interesting thing regarding, we used something similar to Intercom, which is Sandis for our contact support. And luckily for us, they basically have a web version of the customer support. So we had to basically integrate it via WebView, and we use JavaScript for that. As I mentioned, I'm an iOS developer, so I was not very happy about it. It took a lot of Stack Overflow and other stuff to finish it. And regarding analytics, we basically made something I like to call manual analytics. We didn't use any of the frameworks available. We basically collected them locally and sent it straight to our backend. And yeah, basically, those are 2 compromises. The biggest ones. So localization. First of all, again, we avoided any dependencies here. Luckily, again, for us, there is also a web alternative for this. So they already had hosted localization externally. We basically load it via API request whenever the language changes. We store it locally and access it using some extensions. We basically, the approach was we went through other similar frameworks that already exist, and we took similar approach. So that basically we had a string extension. So basically key that let's say localized, and it gives us the value from the local storage. We also used something components for ease of use. So basically we had localizable UI kit class, let's say your localizable UI label, which had an IB inspectable property, which allowed us to set it in the interface builder and not make outlets for every label we have in the app and just to set the localization. Additionally, which actually using some of the frameworks is not supported, but we made is something localizable view controller. So basically, when we used frameworks, if you change your language, you have to like restart your app, so it goes through all the screens and updates them. But we made something that basically triggers on language change, and it updates in real time, so you can be even in the same screen, press a button, and everything automatically updated. So design system. First of all, a few words. Use design systems. We use it in all the apps as well, and it makes your life easier. Trust me. Whenever like product owner comes, I woke up today. I don't like this font. Let's change it everywhere in the app. If you have design system set, it's very easy for you to do. But if you have a like 40 screen app and you have to go through everywhere and change the font, it will be a nightmare. So styles. Basically, we went through a few iterations with this. We started with few customizable elements in the SDK, which means like just a title, some logo. But again, client basically said that's too much of partner involvement. We must predefine it. And the other issue is we can't control environment. What I mean by that is basically we had settable logo. And as you can know, there are different kinds of logos. Some are stretched, some are squared. And basically we already, partners came with complaints. Hey, why does my logo look awful in your SDK? So basically what we did, we had predefined styles. And as I mentioned, we couldn't ship the black box. So the first issue is that partner X can see that we have style for YZ and etc. So basically what we started to do is something called obfuscate, which is basically give like not plain names, but some hashes, some IDs. So basically the idea is so that client X doesn't know that client YG, he still knows that other partners use it, but at least they don't know which ones. And also we already started moving even from that most of the stuff will be sent to us via API requests, and we will set them that way. Another issue though with these predefined styles right now is that if a partner comes and asks us to change something, we need to release a new version for the changes to take effect. Images, like as you know, or maybe don't, but in SDK all the assets are stored in resource bundles. And the problem is that you can't set them in the usual way because in storyboard only accesses images. I mean, you can set them, but you won't see them because the idea is that whatever you set in storyboard is taken from the main bundle. So again, we used some extensions to make it easier for us. Very similar localization. I will show in a second. So typography, very similar story to the images. Also, you should be stored in the main bundle. But as you know, in this case, we couldn't. And yeah, basically, with some custom fonts, as you know, you have to put them in the info list so the system recognizes them and you are able to use them. But we didn't want for every partner to do that. So we went through a lot of searching how to basically load them in from your SDK so you can use them that way. Also wasn't easy. The solution wasn't clear cut and involved some deep core graphics stuff, but at least we got it working. And yeah, but it was a nightmare. So the bundled elements I mentioned before, first of all, we created one for the image views. As I mentioned, you can't set them straight in the storyboard, so we made a custom class, very similar to localization. It has an inspectable property. I know it's not ideal because you have to like The naming is, you have to be precise with the naming here, otherwise it won't show anything. Like here, I'm just not setting if the image cannot be found, but in your case, I guess it could be improved, like checking the image before and like giving some feedback, hey, this image is not found, check your name or something similar. But yeah, this helped us in development a lot, since again, we don't have to drag countless outlets just to set the image. Similar with labels, here we use it for the text color. Again, not ideal string, but it worked for us and saved a lot of code lines. And an SDK like this, like integration guide, is a must. Plus, it has to be very thorough, step by step. And again, you may think it's easy because you developed it, and whenever you give it to partner, he says, oh my God, I can't understand anything, can you explain? So my suggestion here is get a fellow developer to try to integrate your SDK. You'll find the fallbacks. First of all, you'll find if something is not clear. And also, when writing it, in my case at least, the first person who saw it was a PM. He's like, guys, I can't understand anything. How are you supposed to integrate it? I thought it's just plug and play. I said, well, my first response is, well, you don't need to understand it. It's not for you. But then we went into some compromise, and I tried to improve it so it's more user readable and not so technical, even though some parts just requires it to be technical to be clear. But yeah, documentation is very important for SDK, but I guess for apps as well, but that's not part of my topic. So distribution, yeah, as I mentioned, we use Cocoa pods. These are just 2 lines, basically all you need to make your SDK available for the whole wide world. Well, in our case, it was a private. Again, an interesting point, which for me it was not clear why client wanted it to hide so much. Like all the business logic, all the crypto logic, everything is basically stored in backend. But I guess their UI is so pristine that they don't want to share it. But basically, it involved another headache, which we had to use like a private repositories for both our specification and source code. And basically, even like we don't give like a specific access. We use GitLab here, so we made use of something called private tokens, which are like read-only tokens for you to use Git operations, but you can't open it in your browser. Let's say it was an interesting challenge, and here with some help of actually some DevOps guys, we made it work like they wanted. And again, all of this had to be very clearly documented for partners to understand. Otherwise, okay, this is not your day-to-day situation where you just clone the repository and everything works. That's basically it for me. If you have any questions, I hope you do. Feel free to ask. Yes, SDK have. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, 4 or 5, but they are expanding, and every day there comes a new style, so they're preparing to have way more. Like right now, we have, if we base it just on the predefined styles, we have more than 20 styles. So I would assume they have talks with most of them.
And no one is objecting the code proposal?
So far, no one has came to us.
And then you mentioned like using this SDK as black box, or like distributing black box. So this is meant to be a closed source SDK. SDK, right?
Yeah, no. I mentioned there's an issue with dependencies in Blackbox. They wanted Blackbox, but since we have dependencies, we basically couldn't ship it as a Blackbox.
They meaning the customer?
Yeah.
Okay, so you developed the SDK for someone to sell it?
Yes. Okay, I'll just repeat. First question was, is it a black box solution? To which answer is no. And sorry, the last question. So basically, yeah, the question is, are we the developers which are giving the SDK to a client and then he's selling it further? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Does your SDK have so many customizable things that you need to have the predefined styles and not just to let the client to have their own style, like just few views? You can customize few colors, few views, and that's all. Why do you need all this predefined stuff?
Okay, so the question was, why do we need basically the predefined styles? Why just not open few customizable elements? And as I mentioned, we started with that. But one of the customizable elements is logo, which is very tricky to get scale well for all the partners, since there are square logos, stretched logos, maybe no logo, they just want title. So yeah, basically to avoid that headache and the issues which we already had with few partners, when we will have more, we'll have more issues, so we just went for the predefined.
But you could be more strict on that?
We could, but that would make partners angry, I guess.
Okay.
Yes?
You mentioned that you somehow obfuscate each style, so neither partner finds out about other partners, or at least cannot identify them. But what if you just said that one part of the style is a logo? How do you obfuscate the logo?
Yes.
There are like five logos each.
Yeah.
I can just look at the logo and detect it.
Yeah, great question. So basically, the question is regarding obfuscation of styles and the logos. So basically, can the partners see the logos? At the moment, they can, and that's an issue. That's what I mentioned, that we are moving forward to even have no styles in the SDK encoded at all, and all information related will come from the backend.
Any more questions? I have a question.
Yes.
From your experience of writing this integration guide, is it enough for the developers integrating your SDK, or do they still have questions? Because questions coming from personal pain working with SDKs when their integration guide is not enough and I have to reach out to the team for assistance.
So basically, a question was, is the integration guide enough? And don't the partners still come with questions? I like to say it's like an iteration process. So first partners come with questions, but we answer them obviously, but also we try to add some part of the explanation regarding the question to the documentation, so the next partner won't have the same questions. Basically, yeah, they still have some questions right now.
Thank you. Any more questions? All right.